Hey, Scott Jordan and Mark Warner here for Jancast number 129 for Thursday, August 18th. Uh-oh. You know what that means, Mark?
That we're getting close to the end of summer.
And it's right, right. And don't forget winter rinse and liquid ice melt. It's coming. It's right. That would be a blatant product plug, right?
Yeah, but you remember the heat wave we had a couple weeks ago? Glad to see
Yeah.
that go by.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's terrible. It's terrible. So what's in the news, Mark?
Well, the interesting thing that I saw something in the news about the fact that the climate changes are possibly impacting infectious diseases.
Hmm.
And that's interesting because obviously we've been hearing about different types of infectious diseases, including monkeypox. And
Yeah.
monkeypox has been big time on the news.
Yep.
The big thing there is it's known to have started in Africa, but the country with the largest amount of infections is the United States.
Hmm.
So, that is an indication that it was able to hitchhike its way over to the US, and it's now something we need to be conscious of. And so I get a lot of people saying that, do we really need to worry about it? And it's like, well, when HIV,
Yeah.
AIDS first came out, the
Yep.
question was that something that we really need to be concerned about? And over the years, we've seen millions of deaths that have occurred as a result of that.
Yeah.
And, the big question is that, monkeypox, although it's something that's we may be able to control and it's not as widespread as something like AIDS was back in the day, but it could get to that point. I mean,
Yeah.
just the way that the infection rate has skyrocketed in the US is kind of concerning. I know that I've heard that there are many folks traveling from the East Coast to the West Coast in order to get shots to be treated for it. So there is a treatment, a shot that you can take that is the same shot that was given to soldiers if they were exposed to smallpox.
Yeah. Well,
It's a vaccine.
and it's a
So
limited supply of those, from what I've
yeah,
heard. So yeah.
that's why there's people actually traveling to the West Coast where there's apparently a larger supply. But the big questions that come up is, how's this transmitted, right?
Yep.
And it's transmitted through intimate contact. So just like HIV/AIDS, which was originally transmitted a lot through the gay community, it is similar with monkeypox. But as we know, what happened there is that it jumped beyond just that
Yeah.
community into the population at large. So it became any form of intimate contact, whether it was sexual in nature or just a mother giving birth to a child. So those kinds of things are the things that I worry about with this. But
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
good news is, Scott, there's good news on this because
Yep.
you tell me you don't want me to be a downer as I talk about this. But the good news is we do have ways of combating it, and the cleaning industry in general is the front line of defense, far more so than the healthcare community, which is more reactive to something that outbreaks within their community. The cleaning industry is the first feet on the beach, so
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
so the idea is that cleaning community, if they know what they're doing and how to do it, are in a position to prevent a disease from or an outbreak from taking hold.
Well,
So
in this case, because the EPA had put in place the emerging pathogen thing that allowed them to approve products, even though it wasn't on the label. We've already publicized this in previous shows, and you can see it. We'll put a link in the show below it, but we have probably 6 or 8 different products that are approved against it, which is great that the EPA has this process in place because, when COVID started up, they didn't have any way of dealing with it. And as you know, with our germ washing and a bunch of other things, we were talking about people making false claims about the product. So at least they've got a clear indication as to what's effective and what isn't, probably more what's effective. So that's good. So people, can actually use the right product.
well, that whole exercise of going through educating the public at large
Yep.
regarding disinfectants and N lists and so on, it drove home the fact that there is something very, very different about a surface that looks clean
Yeah.
versus a surface that may be sanitized or disinfected. So we were able to educate the community at large on the idea that cleaning is not enough. the next step is to try to educate people on what is actually the differences between sanitizing and disinfectants.
Yeah.
And there's a vast difference there as well. In fact, you were telling me earlier about a quote that you saw.
Yeah, I saw this a while ago and I saved it because we get this question a lot. Not specific to monkeypox or COVID or anything else, but there's a huge amount of confusion about the difference between sanitizing and disinfecting. And I thought this was a statistical way or a visual in your mind way of figuring it. So on any given day, there's 102,465 commercial flights in the world. If 99.9% of those flights arrive safely to their destination, that means 1,025 airplanes would have crashed every day. So that's a pretty significant thing if you put that in terms of germ control and pathogen control. As compared to 99.99%, only 10 airplanes would crash. So that's a good visual way of kind of getting your head around the difference between those. Because, if you go into the regular consumer retail market, most of those products you see on the shelf, I don't want to say a brand in particular, but, most of them are just sanitizers.
Yep. Well, one of the things that I've said in classes, and it's kind of a stretch, but it helps people get their arms around it, that disinfecting is 100 times more thorough than sanitizing. And yet, if you said to the average person over the backyard fence, hey, what do you think I ought to do? Thoroughly sanitize my house or merely disinfect it? They'd say, wow, it sounds like, thoroughly sanitizing it. It sounds great. Well, it's like, guess what? Merely disinfecting it is 100 times, roughly 100 times more effective than thoroughly sanitizing. So there is a big difference there. And, some of the things that come up regarding how do you go after preventing a disease like this, one of them is making sure that you're using a product. You make the change to a product that's, got a kill claim to go after what you're worried about.
Yep.
The second thing is you change your processes and your procedures. And there was actually a program that ISSA's GBAC put on pretty recently. That was with Dr. Gavin Skinner McGregor and Patty Ollinger, and they are pretty awesome folks.
Yeah.
They talked about all the different things that we need to do. And, it really focused on knowing that you're doing things properly. Yeah. And then there's, another element that comes into play, and that is, frequency. We need to do things much more frequently than we were in the past. And, the question is, how do we increase those frequencies? And Scott, you raised a question like, how about robotics?
Yeah. And for those of you that haven't seen it, Amazon is proposing to buy the Roomba maker of the Roomba vacuum or iRobot for $1.7 billion. So that was a successful startup company for sure. They sold it for or it's going to sell it for 1.7. And everybody's like, well, why would Amazon want to buy a robot vacuum company? It's like, well, I don't think they see it as necessarily where we went with the automatic scrubbers and things like that. But apparently, there's a little bit of a concern about the fact that they're going to get access to the data. That when those Roomba things just bounce around, you think they're bouncing around, but they're really mapping your room. And there's some data there that would be beneficial. I'm not exactly sure long term how it would play out, but maybe they'll be able to figure out that a particular room in your house is dirtier than other rooms. And then the next thing you know, you'll be getting suggested for one of those duster tools or something in addition to your Roomba. But
or they're going to mount Alexa on top of it. It's going to cruise around and follow and listen to every conversation you have so that it can pop it up on your Google search engin.
Yeah. But it does tie in with, your point about frequency. And we've been talking about staffing and all the stuff that's involved with training people. And if you don't have the people to train, well, the next best thing, hopefully, is filling in some of the gaps there with the robotics, like we had with our show on May 5th, Jancast number 122, where we talked about the actual real cleaning versus house cleaning.
Yeah, well, John Hill spoke quite a bit about that. He's so well entrenched in the robotic community commercially. And, one of the things that he's brought up is that, first off, is there's a training element involved with engaging with robotics to begin with. You don't just order it through commercial robotics, that is. You don't just order it through, Amazon and have it delivered and then spend the next 3 or 4 weeks trying to figure out how to map it and program it and do all those things. Most people that are operating these things are not engineers or robotic engineers. So one of the things he talked about is that everybody needs to put some emphasis on making sure that there's a very gallant training effort made by the manufacturer that's delivering the robotic equipment, so that can be put into play immediately and not left to a learning curve of the average custodial team. So the idea is for them is somebody should come in, help them map it out, tell it what to do and where to go and how it should do all that, so that when it is then the keys are turned over, they know, they're able to just hit the go button and it goes, rather than having to read manuals and try to figure out how to do it. John refers to that kind of stuff as cobotics. Where there is actually a human element that fits into play with robotics, especially or critically on a commercial cleaning level. The idea is to be able to monitor, engage these things, make sure they're running the right way. There's a certain amount of preventative maintenance comes into play because they're not cheap. And then the other thing that ties into this is that a really good, astute facility manager could potentially manage multiple robots sitting at his desk like you and I are, with multiple screens up and being able to monitor multiple units doing work in multiple buildings or multiple floors. And it lessens the amount of manpower that would be required, but it certainly raises the benchmark on how much knowledge and training that one person would need to have.
I hadn't thought about that. That's very similar to what they're doing with the drones now. Like the thing that just happened a week ago where they took out the terrorist. Well, you could have a guy controlling all the auto scrubbers in a facility from one location, not even in the state, not even in the country necessarily, as long as he could hit a button saying, hey, we got a machine that's stuck in a corner over there, somebody's got to physically go. But you're right. I mean, we didn't actually talk about that when we had that previous Jancast, but that's probably the next thing, is having cameras or somehow tied into either the units or in the facility so you can see around. And you could have one person, kind of like self-checkout at the supermarket, right? You got one person manning 8 different checkouts, where before you needed eight checkers to do it.
Well, the early robotics, when you think about Roomba in the early days, they kind of self-taught because they bumped around, 15 times. And the idea was that they would cover the entire area. But now there's a whole science called, telematics, and it's all about the data that the machines not only collect but transmit to a dashboard that somebody can help manage. And I think that's really where this is going, that robotics are going to be communicating very, very aggressively with some form of dashboard that a facility manager would be using to do all that.
Well, that's pretty cool. So that'd be future show number 3 we just covered there, some of which is already happening. But hey, when you got all this free time, because the robot's doing all the cleaning in the facility, you got time to go into your bathroom and use a smart toilet. What?
So you were talking a little bit earlier today.
So apparently the estimated growth of the market's supposed to go from 4 million to 3 million to 4.5 million in the matter of a couple years. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, apparently some of these smart toilets have a virtual assistants built into them. So you can tell your toilet to do something. You could dictate emails through the toilet, or what, who knows? It's crazy.
Well, I know that some of the things, from a real world standpoint, is that it's some of them have like UV lighting, which is designed to keep do some form of disinfection, and automatic flushing, of course, which isn't brand new. We've seen that in commercial restrooms before, but Bluetooth connectivity, which you talked about, and self-opening seats, which will swallow you up. No, hopefully not. But
well, the scary part is And what data are
Are
those
they
smart
collect?
toilets keeping, huh? Ooh. Well, on
Yeah,
that
it's
note,
on that note, and we really don't want to go into detail on what it could collect, right?
yeah,
So,
all good stuff. So stay tuned for coming shows. We're in our rotation now that our next show will be 2 weeks from now. We're going to have another special guest. So every other show, we've been having a special guest come on, and getting really great feedback on having some new people join us on the Jancast. So the show is evolving just like robotics and everything else, right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
We all evolve. So, anyway,
Well, thanks for tuning in, everybody. Stay cool out there, and don't forget, liquid ice melt and winter rinse is coming.
yes, that was the BPP, the blatant product plug.
You got it. Okay. See
Yeah.
y'all.